Large-sized ships lurking in shadows, the galaxy realized too late. They were human HFY Sci-Fi story. The first sighting was dismissed as a sensor malfunction. Deep in the Kepler Nebula, where stellar radiation played havoc with even the most advanced scanning equipment, the Zephyrian patrol vessel Night Stalker detected something impossible. A massive ship, nearly 3 kilometers long, drifting in the cosmic shadows like a sleeping leviathan. Captain Vexitha of the Zephyrian Empire squinted at the readings, her 4 eyes processing the data with growing unease. The ship's signature was unlike anything in their databases. Not Zephyrian, not Cronin, not even the ancient ethereal designs that haunted dead systems. It was something else entirely. Interference from the nebula, her sensor officer chirped, mandibles clicking nervously. Has to be. Nothing that large could hide in our territory without detection. But Vexitha had survived 40 years of galactic politics and 3 interstellar wars. She knew the difference between sensor ghosts and real threats. Maintain distance, record everything, and send a priority transmission to High Command. The message that reached Zephyrian Central Command 3 days later would change everything. Within hours, similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Cronin hegemony detected massive shapes lurking in asteroid fields. The ethereal collective's deep space monitors caught glimpses of colossal vessels hiding in the corona of dying stars. The Valdris Union's border scouts reported ship signatures that defied classification, moving through hyperspace lanes that shouldn't exist. At first, the galactic powers assumed it was each other. The Zephyrians accused the Cronins of developing new stealth technology. The Cronins pointed fingers at the Ethereals. The Ethereals whispered of ancient Valdris experiments gone wrong. But as more reports came in, a chilling truth emerged. These weren't their ships. In the sealed chambers of the Galactic Intelligence Consortium, representatives from 12 major civilizations gathered in emergency session. The holographic displays showed a map of known space, dotted with red markers indicating unexplained contacts. There were hundreds of them. "They're everywhere," whispered Director Thorne of the Terran Colonial Authority, his human features pale with concern. "Massive ships, moving in patterns we can't predict, using technology we don't recognize." "Terran," scoffed Chancellor Crix of the Zephyrian Empire, her voice dripping with disdain. "Your species has been struggling to maintain 3 colony worlds. These vessels are beyond anything in your primitive arsenal." But Thorne said nothing. He couldn't, because buried deep in classified files, behind encryption protocols that would take centuries to crack, lay the truth that would terrify the galaxy. Earth hadn't been struggling. It had been waiting. The deception had begun 200 years ago, when humanity first made contact with the Zephyrian Empire. The aliens had expected to find a primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel. Instead, they found exactly what humanity wanted them to find: a struggling civilization of 3 billion souls, confined to a handful of worlds, desperate for trade and protection. The masquerade was perfect. Human colonies were deliberately kept small, their technology carefully limited to what the galaxy expected. Trade ships were designed to look cobbled together from salvage parts. Military vessels were few and seemingly obsolete. To the rest of the galaxy, humanity was exactly what they appeared to be: a minor species, barely worth consideration. But in the depths of space, in systems no galactic map had ever charted, humanity's true face was revealed. The Shadow Fleet had been under construction for generations. Massive ships built in zero-point energy foundries, powered by technology that bent the laws of physics, crewed by soldiers who had never seen daylight on any world. Admiral Kota Nakamura stood on the bridge of the Yamato's Revenge, watching the holographic display that showed the galaxy's growing panic. At 65, she was a legend among the Shadow Fleet, a woman who had overseen the construction of 47 dreadnoughts and never once set foot on Earth. "They're finally noticing us," her tactical officer, Commander Reeves, observed with dark amusement. "Took them long enough." 2 centuries of careful planning," Nakamura replied, her voice carrying the weight of generations. "Every ship hidden, every movement calculated, every encounter staged. They think they know humanity. They're about to learn how wrong they are." The first real contact came in the Outer Rim, where the Cronin hegemony's Fifth Fleet was conducting what they called pacification operations, the systematic destruction of primitive civilizations that refused to submit to their rule. The Cronins had been at it for millennia, turning entire species into slave labor, or simply wiping them out if they proved too troublesome. Fleet Admiral Gorthak commanded the operation from his flagship, the Bone Crusher, a massive vessel designed to inspire terror in lesser species. His fleet of 36 ships had just finished glassing the third planet in the Kepler 438 system when the shadows began to move. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported, voice tight with confusion, "I'm detecting multiple contacts bearing—" The officer's voice cut off as the readings spiked beyond comprehension. From the nebula's depths, they emerged like nightmares given form. The first ship was 1.5 kilometers long, its hull black as the void between stars, bristling with weapons that seemed to shift and pulse with their own malevolent intelligence. Behind it came others, dozens of them, each one larger than the Cronin flagship, moving with a grace that defied their massive size. Gorthak's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "Impossible. No civilization has ships that large. Our intelligence would have—" The lead ship's communication array came online, flooding the Cronin fleet with a signal that bypassed every encryption protocol they possessed. The voice that spoke was human, but there was something else in it, a coldness that seemed to reach across the void and touch their very souls. "Cronin vessels," the voice said, each word carefully enunciated. "You are in violation of Terran-protected space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Gorthak's laughter was harsh and grating. "Terran, your pathetic species cowers on 3 worlds. You dare threaten the Cronin hegemony?" "We dare many things," the voice replied, and now there was something else in it. Amusement, dark and predatory. "The question is whether you're intelligent enough to survive learning about them." The Cronin fleet opened fire first, as they always did. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, kinetic weapons that could shatter moons, energy beams that could boil oceans. Everything they had learned in 1,000 years of conquest. The barrage was enough to destroy a planet. It wasn't enough to scratch the lead human ship. The weapons fire simply stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed. Stopped, as if the laws of physics themselves had decided to take a break. The massive human vessel continued its approach, untouched, unstoppable. "Impossible," Gorthak whispered. "Our weapons are primitive," the human voice interrupted. "Your plasma burns at 2 million degrees. Our hull armor is forged in the heart of neutron stars. Your kinetic weapons move at a fraction of light speed. Our defensive fields operate in dimensions you haven't discovered yet. Did you really think you were the apex predators of this galaxy?" What followed wasn't a battle. It was an education. The human ships moved like dancers, their weapons speaking in languages the Cronins had never heard. Energy beams that didn't just destroy but unmade their targets, reducing ships to their component atoms. Gravitational weapons that turned space itself into a weapon, crushing vessels like tin cans in a hydraulic press. Temporal distortions that aged ships centuries in seconds, leaving them to drift as ancient hulks. In 12 minutes, the Cronin Fifth Fleet was gone. Not destroyed, erased. The only survivor was Gorthak's flagship, left crippled but intact, its crew alive but forever changed by what they had witnessed. The human voice spoke once more, and this time there was no mistaking the threat beneath the words. "Return to your empire. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them that humanity has been watching, waiting, preparing. Tell them that the age of conquest is over." The news spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The Cronin hegemony, one of the most powerful military forces in known space, had lost an entire fleet to a species they had dismissed as primitives. The recordings from Gorthak's ship were analyzed by every major intelligence agency, and the conclusions were always the same: impossible. But impossible was becoming humanity's signature. In the Zephyrian capital of Nexus Prime, Emperor Vexithal convened an emergency session of the High Council. The massive chamber, carved from a single crystal that had taken 1,000 years to grow, hummed with nervous energy as representatives from across the Empire gathered to discuss the threat. How? Chancellor Crix demanded, her voice echoing off the crystal walls. How did they hide ships that large? Our sensor network spanned half the galaxy. They didn't hide them, replied Intelligence Director Zask, his ancient features grave with concern. They built them in places we never thought to look. Dead systems, rogue planets, the depths of nebulae. They've been constructing this fleet for generations, right under our noses. A fleet of what size? The Emperor asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. Unknown, Zask admitted. Our estimates range from hundreds to thousands of ships. The Cronins encountered 47 vessels. The Ethereals report sightings of over 100. The Valdris Union has detected fleet movements that suggest more. The silence that followed was deafening. For centuries, the galactic powers had operated under the assumption that they knew every significant military force in the galaxy. The idea that humanity, weak, primitive, struggling humanity, had been building a fleet to rival their own was incomprehensible. But the evidence was mounting. Deep space monitoring stations were detecting gravitational anomalies that suggested massive objects moving through hyperspace. Merchant vessels reported encounters with ships that appeared on no registry, vessels that dwarfed anything in the civilian fleet. And in the intelligence networks of a dozen species, whispers began to circulate of a human fleet that had been hiding in the shadows for 2 centuries. The second major engagement came 3 weeks later, when the Ethereal Collective's third exploration fleet encountered human vessels in the Andromeda approach. Unlike the Cronins, the Ethereals were not conquerors, but explorers, seeking to catalog and study the galaxy's mysteries. Their ships were sleek, elegant vessels designed for science rather than war. They were also completely unprepared for what they found. Fleet Coordinator Whisper of Stars commanded the Ethereal expedition from her flagship, the Cosmic Insight, a vessel that was as much a laboratory as a warship. Her fleet of 12 ships had been investigating reports of unusual energy signatures in the outer rim when they encountered the human formation. 3 ships, each one larger than her entire fleet combined, hung in the void like sleeping giants. Their hulls were black as the space between stars, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when observed directly. They made no hostile moves, but their presence was enough to make the ethereal sensors scream warnings. Unknown vessels, Whisper of Stars transmitted on standard galactic frequencies. I am Fleet Coordinator Whisper of Stars of the Ethereal Collective. Please identify yourselves. The response came immediately, in perfect ethereal language. Greetings, Coordinator. I am Admiral Zara Okafor of the Terran Shadow Fleet. We are conducting operations in this sector. Terran? Whisper of Stars' voice carried the musical tones of confusion. Your species is listed as having minimal spacefaring capabilities. These vessels are beyond anything in our databases. Your databases are incomplete, Admiral Okafor replied, and there was something in her voice that made the ethereal shiver. We have been observing your species for some time, Coordinator. Your dedication to knowledge is admirable, but knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. What do you mean? You seek to catalog the galaxy's mysteries, but you've never asked the most important question. What happens when those mysteries don't want to be found? The transmission cut off and the 3 human ships began to move. Not toward the ethereal fleet, but around them in patterns that defied tactical analysis. They moved like predators circling prey, but their weapons remained silent. Coordinator, her sensor officer reported, voice tight with fear. They're scanning us, not our ships, us. They're reading our biosignatures, our neural patterns, our genetic codes. They know everything about us. Impossible. Our ships are shielded against. Their scanners are operating on frequencies we didn't know existed, the officer interrupted. They're not just reading our technology, they're reading our thoughts. The truth was more terrifying than the Ethereals could have imagined. The human ships weren't just scanning them, they were cataloging them, adding every detail to a database that already contained the complete genetic, technological, and cultural profiles of every major species in the galaxy. Humanity had been watching, learning, preparing for 2 centuries. Admiral Okafor's voice returned, now carrying a tone of gentle warning. Your species has great potential, Coordinator, But potential must be guided by wisdom. Return to your space. Tell your leaders that humanity is no longer content to remain in the shadows. Tell them that the galaxy is about to change. The ethereal fleet left without further incident, but the message they carried back to their homeworld sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Humanity hadn't just been hiding. They had been studying. They knew more about the galaxy's major powers than those powers knew about themselves. In the depths of space aboard the command ship Eternal Vigilance, humanity's true leadership convened for the first time in 50 years. The Council of Shadows was composed of 13 individuals who had never been recorded in any official human database, men and women who had dedicated their lives to preparing for this moment. Council Prime. Aidan Blackwood stood at the center of the chamber, his weathered face bearing the weight of centuries of planning. At 93, he was the oldest member of the council, having overseen the Shadow Fleet project since its inception. His voice, when he spoke, carried the authority of someone who had shaped the destiny of an entire species. "The masquerade is ending," he announced to the assembled council members. "For 200 years, we have allowed the galaxy to believe humanity was weak, primitive, struggling. That illusion served its purpose. Now it's time for the truth." "The fleets are in position," reported Admiral Kenji Sato, commander of the Eastern Shadow Fleet. 347 ships, fully operational. The Chronins and Ethereals have had their warnings. The rest of the galaxy will learn soon enough. "And if they resist?" asked Dr. Ivy Chen, the Council's chief scientist and architect of humanity's most advanced technologies. Blackwood's smile was cold as the void. "Then they'll discover why we've been hiding in the shadows for 2 centuries. We didn't build the Shadow Fleet to conquer the galaxy. We built it to protect ourselves from those who would conquer us. But if they force our hand," the implications hung in the air like a sword over the galaxy's head. Humanity hadn't just been building ships. They had been building weapons, technologies and strategies that the galaxy couldn't imagine. And now, with their secret exposed, they were prepared to use them. The third encounter came in the heart of civilized space, in the Nexus trade corridor, where merchant vessels from a dozen species conducted business under the protection of the Galactic Commerce Commission. It was meant to be neutral ground, a place where even enemies could trade in peace. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace numbered 57 ships, their massive forms casting shadows across the trade station that served as the corridor's hub. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons powered but not targeted, their shields raised but not aggressive. It was a show of force designed to send a message without firing a shot. Trade Station Alpha 7 was humanity's introduction to the galaxy. For 2 centuries, human merchants had come here to trade raw materials and agricultural products for the advanced technology their species supposedly couldn't produce. The station's manager, a Valdrus named Kextar, had grown wealthy from the human trade, selling them outdated weapons and obsolete computers at inflated prices. Now, as he stared at the massive human fleet through the station's viewports, Kextar finally understood how thoroughly he had been deceived. "This is Admiral Enzo Volkov of the Terran Shadow Fleet," the transmission began, broadcast on all frequencies. "We are here to discuss new trade arrangements." Kextar's voice shook as he responded. "Admiral, this is unexpected. Our species has never revealed what we're capable of," Volkov interrupted. "There's a difference. We're requesting a meeting with the station's trade commission. We have proposals to discuss." The meeting that followed would be remembered as the moment the galaxy's economic balance shifted forever. The human delegation, led by Admiral Volkov and Trade Representative Luna Okafor, arrived at the station in a shuttle that was itself larger than most civilian ships. They walked through the corridors with the confidence of people who knew they held all the cards. "For 2 centuries, Luna Okafor began, addressing the assembled trade commissioners, humanity has been portrayed as a minor species, dependent on the galaxy's more advanced civilizations for technology and protection. This was a convenient fiction that served our purposes. It no longer does." The holographic displays she activated showed the true scope of human industry, massive shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, mining operations that stripped entire rogue planets of their resources, manufacturing facilities that could produce more goods in a year than most civilizations could in a century. You've been trading with actors, she continued, her voice carrying the weight of revelation. Humans playing the role of primitives, buying your outdated technology with raw materials we could have refined ourselves. We did this to remain hidden while we prepared for the day we would reveal ourselves. Prepared for what? Demanded Chancellor Vex of the Zephyrian Trade Delegation. For the day we would take our rightful place in the galaxy, Admiral Volkov replied. Humanity will no longer accept the role of junior partner. We are offering new trade agreements, but they will be between equals. Those who refuse to accept this new reality will find themselves trading with empty space. The threat was clear. Humanity controlled resources that the galaxy depended on. Rare metals, agricultural products, and now, as the displays showed, technology that exceeded anything the major powers possessed. They were no longer asking for a place at the table. They were demanding it. But it was the final revelation that sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Luna Okafor activated one last holographic display showing the positions of human ships throughout the galaxy. The red dots were everywhere, in orbit around every major world, hidden in every important system, watching every critical trade route. We know where you live, she said simply. We know your weaknesses, your fears, your secrets. We've been watching you for 2 centuries, learning everything there is to know about your civilizations. You've been trading with us, fighting around us, building empires that span the galaxy, and all the while we've been there, in the shadows, waiting. The silence that followed was deafening. Every representative in the room understood the implications. Humanity hadn't just been hiding. They had been infiltrating, observing, preparing. They knew everything about the galaxy's major powers, while those powers knew nothing about them. What do you want? Kextar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Peace, Luna Okafor replied. Respect, recognition. The galaxy can continue as it has, with one difference. Humanity will no longer be invisible. We will trade as equals, negotiate as equals, and defend ourselves as equals. Those who can accept this will find us valuable allies. Those who cannot. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The massive fleet hanging in space outside the station finished it for her. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy's balance of power shifted dramatically. Some civilizations, like the Ethereal Collective, welcomed humanity's emergence with cautious optimism. Others, like the Zephyrian Empire, demanded explanations and guarantees. The Cronan hegemony, still reeling from the destruction of their 5th fleet, retreated to their core worlds and began preparing for a war they weren't sure they could win. But it was the Valdris Union that made the first mistake. The Valdris had built their civilization on the principle of strength through unity. They absorbed smaller species into their collective, offering protection in exchange for complete integration. They saw humanity's emergence not as a threat to be respected, but as an opportunity to be seized. The Valdris fleet that arrived at the edge of the Sol system was impressive by any galactic standard. 200 ships, including their massive command vessel, Unity's Embrace. They came not as conquerors, but as diplomats, offering humanity a place within their union. They were met by a single human ship. The Shadow of Earth was Admiral Nakamura's personal vessel, a ship that had never appeared in any galactic database. At 3 kilometers long and armed with weapons that defied classification, it was a statement of intent wrapped in black metal and powered by technologies that shouldn't exist. Valdris Fleet, Admiral Nakamura's voice crackled across the communication channels. You are not welcome in this system. Withdraw immediately. Fleet Admiral Gextar of the Valdris Union laughed, the sound echoing through his flagship's bridge. A single ship against our entire fleet? Human, your confidence exceeds your capabilities. Does it? Nakamura's voice carried a dangerous quiet. You've studied our colonies, our trade routes, our apparent weaknesses. But have you studied our history? Your history is irrelevant. You will join the Union or... Our history, Nakamura interrupted, is written in blood. We are a species that has survived ice ages, plague, war, and our own worst instincts. We are descended from predators who learn to cooperate, from survivors who refuse to surrender. And we have spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment. The shadow of Earth moved then, accelerating toward the Valdris fleet with impossible speed. The aliens opened fire, their weapons painting space with deadly light. The human ship didn't dodge. It simply absorbed the barrage, its hull glowing with absorbed energy. Impossible, Gexitar breathed. No ship can withstand that much firepower. No ship you understand, Nakamura replied. But we stopped building ships you could understand a long time ago. The Shadow of Earth's weapons came online. Not the crude energy weapons or kinetic projectiles the galaxy expected, but something entirely new. Reality itself seemed to bend around the human ship as it fired, space-time rippling with energies that made the Valdris sensors scream. The lead Valdris ship simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not vaporized, erased from reality as if it had never been. The second ship suffered the same fate, then the third. In the space of minutes, the Valdris fleet was reduced to scrap and memories. Only the flagship remained, its crew paralyzed with terror as the human ship approached. Nakamura's voice filled their communication channels, no longer human, but something colder, more ancient. Return to your union. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them that humanity offers friendship to those who approach with respect, and annihilation to those who approach with conquest. The choice is theirs. The Valdris fleet limped back to their space, carrying news that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of power. Humanity wasn't just technologically advanced. They were beyond the galaxy's comprehension, operating on principles that other species couldn't grasp. In the depths of space, the Council of Shadows convened once more. The revelation of their existence had gone exactly as planned, but the galaxy's response was more varied than they had anticipated. Some species sought alliance, others prepared for war, and a few simply went silent, withdrawing into their shells like frightened creatures. The Andromedans are requesting a meeting, reported Intelligence Director Zara Okafor. They claim to have information about threats beyond our galaxy. The Cronin hegemony is mobilizing their entire fleet, added Admiral Sato. They're calling it a defensive measure, but our agents report they're preparing for a preemptive strike. Council Prime Blackwood nodded grimly. They're afraid. Good. Fear will make them careful, but it will also make them desperate, and desperate enemies are dangerous enemies. The Zephyrians are offering a formal alliance, Dr. Chen reported. They want to discuss technology sharing and mutual defense pacts. And the Ethereals? They're asking questions we're not sure we want to answer, Chen replied. They want to know how we developed our technology so quickly, where we found the resources to build the Shadow Fleet, and what our ultimate intentions are. Blackwood was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. The masquerade was over, but the game was just beginning. Humanity had revealed itself as a major power, but with that revelation came new responsibilities and new dangers. We proceed as planned, he finally said. We offer alliance to those who approach with respect, trade to those who offer fair terms, and protection to those who need it. But make no mistake, the age of humanity hiding in the shadows is over. We are no longer the galaxy's secret. We are its newest player, and we intend to play to win. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Cronin hegemony, convinced that humanity posed an existential threat to their empire, launched a massive offensive against human space. They brought everything they had, 1,000 ships, their most advanced weapons, their most experienced commanders. They lasted 4 hours. The Battle of the Outer Rim would be studied for generations as a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. The Cronin fleet, expecting to face the primitive human vessels they had encountered in the past, instead found themselves fighting an enemy that operated by entirely different rules. Human ships phased in and out of normal space, appearing behind enemy lines before vanishing into dimensions that didn't exist on any Cronin star chart. Their weapons struck from impossible angles, bending space-time to deliver death from directions that had no names. Cronin ships found themselves fighting their own shadows, their own reflections, their own worst fears given form. Admiral Gorthak, the sole survivor of the first human encounter, commanded the Cronin fleet from his rebuilt flagship. He had studied the human vessels, analyzed their tactics, prepared for their unconventional approach to warfare. It wasn't enough. They're not just using advanced technology, he reported to Cronin High Command as his fleet crumbled around him. They're using the universe itself as a weapon. Space and time bend to their will. Physics becomes their ally. How do you fight an enemy that can rewrite the laws of reality? The answer, as the Cronin Empire discovered, was that you didn't. You surrendered or you died. The Cronin surrender came after the human fleet appeared in orbit around their homeworld. 50 massive ships that turned day to night with their shadows. The planetary defense systems, the orbital fortresses, the pride of the Cronin military, all of it was simply swept aside like debris before a storm. But humanity didn't conquer. They didn't occupy. They didn't even land. Admiral Nakamura's voice broadcast across the planet's communication networks, reaching every Cronin citizen simultaneously. Your military has been defeated. Your fleets are destroyed. Your empire is at our mercy. But we are not conquerors. We are defenders. Cease all aggressive actions against human space and innocent species, and you will be allowed to rebuild. Continue your campaigns of conquest, and you will be erased from the galaxy. The Cronin Empire, which had dominated a quarter of the galaxy for millennia, agreed to the terms without negotiation. The alternative was extinction. But it was the aftermath of the war that truly shocked the galaxy. Human fleets appeared in dozens of systems, not as conquerors, but as protectors. Primitive species that had lived in fear of Cronin raids suddenly found themselves under human protection. Trade routes that had been plagued by pirates were secured by vessels that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Humanity wasn't building an empire. They were building a different kind of civilization entirely. The Galactic Congress, the loose confederation of species that had governed interstellar relations for 1,000 years, convened in emergency session. Representatives from every major civilization gathered on the neutral world of Sanctuary to discuss the new reality. The human delegation arrived in a single ship, but that ship was larger than some space stations. The voice of Earth settled into orbit around Sanctuary like a sleeping giant, its presence a reminder of humanity's newfound power. The human representative was someone the galaxy had never seen before. A woman named Director Amara Okafor, who spoke with the authority of someone who had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the Great Hall. Humanity comes before you not as conquerors, but as partners. For too long, this galaxy has been ruled by the principle that might makes right. The strong prey upon the weak, the advanced exploit the primitive, the many are sacrificed for the few. And you offer an alternative? Challenged Chancellor Vex of the Zephyrian Empire. We offer evolution, Director Okafor replied. Humanity proposes a new galactic order, one based on cooperation rather than conquest, on protection rather than predation. We have the power to enforce this vision, but we prefer to achieve it through consensus. The holographic displays that appeared around the hall showed the scope of humanity's true capabilities. Not just their fleet, but their infrastructure. Massive construction projects that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen, technologies that could reshape worlds, resources that could supply entire civilizations. We have been building for 2 centuries, she continued, not just ships and weapons, but a vision of what the galaxy could become. We offer that vision to you now. Join us in creating a civilization worthy of the stars. The debates that followed would reshape the galaxy's future. Some species embraced humanity's vision, seeing an opportunity to transcend their limitations. Others resisted, fearing the loss of their independence. A few attempted to form coalitions against the new human hegemony. All of them discovered that humanity had prepared for every possibility. The Ethereal Collective was the first to sign the Terran Accords, the comprehensive agreement that would govern humanity's relationship with the galaxy. The Ethereals, with their love of knowledge and exploration, found kinship with humanity's vision of cooperation and growth. The Zephyrian Empire followed, their pragmatic leadership recognizing that alliance with humanity offered more benefits than resistance. The Valdres Union joined reluctantly, their collective consciousness struggling to accept a reality where they were no longer the dominant assimilators. Even the Cronin hegemony eventually signed, their military culture adapting to serve as peacekeepers rather than conquerors under human guidance. But it was the smaller species, the ones who had lived in fear for generations, who embraced humanity's protection most eagerly. Suddenly, civilizations that had been on the verge of extinction found themselves not just surviving, but thriving under the shadow of the human fleets. Years passed, and the galaxy began to change in ways that few had anticipated. The constant warfare that had plagued interstellar relations for millennia began to fade, replaced by an era of unprecedented cooperation and growth. Trade flourished under human protection, science advanced through unprecedented collaboration, and exploration resumed as species worked together to unlock the galaxy's mysteries. But in the depths of space, in the shadows between stars, the human fleets continued their eternal vigil. They had emerged from hiding not to conquer, but to protect, and that mission never ended. Admiral Nakamura, now in her 80s, stood on the bridge of the Yamato's Revenge and watched the stars wheel overhead. The galaxy was at peace, but peace was fragile, and those who protected it could never rest. "Ma'am," her tactical officer reported, "we're receiving long-range sensor data from the Andromeda approach. Unknown contacts moving toward the galactic rim." Nakamura smiled, the expression sharp as a blade. "New players in the game?" "Unknown, ma'am, but they're big. Bigger than anything we've seen before." "Then we'll do what we've always done," she replied, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's hidden history. "We'll watch, we'll wait, we'll prepare, and when the time comes, we'll remind the universe that humanity doesn't surrender." The stars held their secrets, but humanity held the shadows. And in those shadows, they were building something the galaxy had never seen before. A civilization that had learned to survive by becoming the thing that others feared to face. The age of hiding was over. The age of humanity had begun. And in the depths of space, where light never reached and silence reigned supreme, the shadow fleets of Earth continued their eternal dance among the stars, guardians of a peace they had fought centuries to achieve, protectors of a galaxy that was finally learning what it meant to be truly free. The last message came from the depths of space, transmitted on frequencies that shouldn't exist, delivered by ships that had never been built, spoken by voices that had never drawn breath. To those who would threaten the peace we have created, to those who would return to the old ways of conquest and domination, to those who believe that might alone makes right, know this: we are humanity. We are the shadow between the stars, the silence between the words, the darkness that watches while you sleep. We have been your nightmare, your salvation, your judgment, and your hope. We have been hiding in plain sight for 2 centuries, and now we stand revealed. The galaxy is under our protection now. Not our rule, but our protection. Those who would destroy will find us implacable. Those who would conquer will find us immovable. Those who would prey upon the innocent will find us unforgiving. But those who would build, who would grow, who would reach for something greater than themselves, they will find us allies beyond their wildest dreams. We are the children of a small blue world that learned to dream of stars. We are the descendants of creatures who crawled from the mud and reached for the heavens. We are the inheritors of a legacy written in blood and starlight, in hope and determination, in the refusal to surrender even when surrender seemed like the only option. We are humanity. We are the guardians of the galaxy. The Shadow Fleet's final message, story completion. We are humanity. We are the guardians of the galaxy. And we are eternal. The transmission ended, but its echoes would reverberate through the cosmos for generations to come. In council chambers across 1,000 worlds, in the bridge of every warship, in the hearts of every being who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond, the message had been received. The galaxy had learned, perhaps too late, that the greatest predators were not always the loudest. Sometimes they were the ones who learned to hunt in perfect silence, to strike from the shadows, to become the darkness itself. But humanity had chosen a different path. They had become the darkness not to devour the light, but to protect it. They had mastered the art of war not to wage it, but to ensure it would never need to be waged again. In the depths of the Kepler Nebula, where the first human ship had been spotted all those months ago, Captain Vexitha of the Zephyrian Empire sat in her command chair and stared at the empty space where nightmares had once lurked. The Night Stalker had been upgraded with human technology now, sensors that could see through dimensions, shields that bent reality, weapons that could unmake matter itself. She was no longer hunting shadows. She had become one. "Contact on sensors," her officer reported, voice steady now with the confidence that came from knowing they were no longer alone in the dark. "Unknown vessel, bearing directly for the galactic core." "Human?" Vexitha asked. "Negative. Architecture suggests something else, something new." Vexitha smiled, her four eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Then we do what our allies taught us. We watch, we wait, we prepare." The unknown ship moved through space with purpose, its hull scarred by journeys through the void between galaxies. Inside, beings of crystalline thought and quantum consciousness discussed the reports they had received from their scouts, tales of a galaxy that had achieved something unprecedented in the cosmic order. "Peace. The humans," their leader communicated through harmonics that would have shattered lesser minds. "They have done what we thought impossible. They have unified chaos. Should we be concerned?" another asked. "No," came the reply, resonating with something that might have been respect. "We should be impressed, and perhaps we should learn." Far below in the galaxy they had once thought to conquer, the shadow fleets of humanity continued their eternal patrol. They had emerged from hiding not as conquerors, but as protectors, not as overlords, but as guardians. They had learned the hardest lesson of all, that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when not to. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders and terrors beyond imagination. But in its depths, in the spaces between the stars where only the brave or the foolish dared to venture, humanity kept watch. They were the shadow between the stars, the silence between the words, the darkness that made the light possible. They were humanity, and they were home. The end. In the annals of galactic history, this period would be remembered as the Great Revelation, the moment when the universe learned that its most dangerous predators were not the ones who roared their presence to the cosmos, but the ones who had learned to whisper death and sing life in equal measure. Humanity had spent 2 centuries perfecting not just the art of war, but the far more difficult art of peace. And in doing so, they had given the galaxy something it had never known before. Hope for a future where strength served wisdom, where power protected rather than consumed, and where the darkness between the stars held not terror, but the promise of tomorrow.